Well, hello again. My name is Becky and I'm coming to you from Liberia on the beach. I'm here for another week before I head back to Uganda where I'm currently living, but I will be moving here to Liberia in November of this year. But I thought, as I just have one more week here at the moment, that I should really take advantage of everything that this beautiful country has to offer. So this morning, as Dave left for work at 6:45 in the morning, I put my swimming costume on, grabbed my towel, and I headed down to the beach for an early morning swim. You know, there's a really interesting phenomenon here at the part of the beach that you can swim at on the compound that we're staying on. And there's a really strong current. It's not a current that takes you back out to sea, so it's safe to swim, but it's kind of a current that runs parallel to the shore. So I put my bag out on the sand with my towel in and waded into the ocean and I started to swim. And you know, I swam for a good 5-10 minutes and then I stopped and I looked back at the shore to see how far I had traveled, only to discover that in all of my hard work swimming, I hadn't moved at all. I was still exactly level with the bag that I had placed on the sand. I was swimming forward, but I was not getting anywhere. And you know, as I swam, I started to think that sometimes life can feel a little bit like that, right? You know, we can be working really hard, and yet it feels like we are seeing absolutely no progress. And we can experience that in all kinds of different areas of our lives. It can be in work, in our careers, feeling that we're working so hard and pushing so hard, but nothing is changing. We're not seeing any development. We're not getting that promotion that we were desperate for. We're not getting a pay raise. Nothing is happening that moves us forward, and yet we're working so hard. It can just be in our home life, in, you know, those homeschooling kids right now. I can imagine that there's definitely a feeling of moving forward but not really getting anywhere. With lockdown, you know, we're still doing things, we're still working, but we're not getting into a different phase in our lives. It can even feel a little bit like that with our relationship with God sometimes, I think. You know, we can feel like we're doing all the right things to be moving forward. We're going to church, we're praying, we're reading the Bible, and yet still feel like we're not really developing, like feeling occasionally like God might be a little bit distant from us and that we're not really hearing from him so clearly. You know, I've been reading in the last few days about Joseph in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. And this man had not the easiest section of his life. You know, at 17 years old, he was sold by his brothers into slavery and then falsely accused of a crime and ended up in prison. And honestly, I think that he would probably have felt a little bit like this as well, because he was moving forward. He kept on working. And in fact, in each of those areas, in Potiphar's household, in the prison, he kept finding himself moved up. He kept finding himself promoted. And yet his situation hadn't changed. It hadn't progressed. He still wasn't free. He still was a slave or a prisoner. He hadn't developed past that point. It's a hard situation to be in, I think, when you feel like you're swimming against the current and you're not making any progress. But what can we do when we find ourselves in that situation? Well, I think the very first thing to do is recognize that even though we may not be making obvious progress, we are getting stronger. You know, if I went to this beach every day and swam for half an hour in that same spot, by the end of that year, I may not have moved any more along the shoreline. I may still be level with the bag that I'd placed on the beach. But I can tell you one thing, I would be a lot stronger. My muscles would have developed. My skill in swimming would have improved. I would have changed in that year. I would have grown. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 tells us to run with perseverance the race marked out for us. It doesn't say run that really nice easy race that's never going to be a big problem. It's always going to just feel nice and smooth and easy. Perseverance means pushing through. It means carrying on, even when it feels like we are getting nowhere. So I think one of the hardest times for Joseph in his life was probably when he was in the prison, and he'd just interpreted a couple of dreams for Pharaoh's baker and his cupbearer, and he had said to the cupbearer, look, when you're restored to your position, you're going to have the ear of Pharaoh. Please, 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 can you tell him about me? Can you tell him that I am here unjustly, that I was accused of a false crime, that I do not belong in this place? And I think in the next few days, Joseph would have walked around with a spring in his step, like, I am going to get out of here. This is going to change right now. This situation is becoming something different. I've put all this hard work in, and now I'm going to see progress. But the weeks go by and nothing changes. The situation doesn't alter. Joseph is still in the same place. He is not making any headway against that current. And it actually takes 2 whole years of his life before anything changes, before Pharaoh summons him to interpret his dream and his life dramatically alters. But for 2 years, there was nothing. And yet, when Joseph had his chance for freedom, when Pharaoh did finally call on him, when the cupbearer finally remembered his promise, he didn't go to Pharaoh and fall on his knees and say, you've got to get me out of here. This isn't fair. He didn't start saying, okay, fine, I will interpret your dream, but only on the condition that you let me out of this place where I have been unjustly imprisoned, where I have seen no progress. Instead, he gave all of the glory to God. And in fact, in Genesis chapter 41, verse 16, when talking about interpreting Pharaoh's dream, Joseph said, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So it's really, really interesting, because in Joseph's time of going nowhere, of seeing no development, of making no progress in light of his freedom, he still grew. He grew closer to God. He grew stronger in his abilities. And he grew aware of the fact that nothing he could do would change his situation, but that it was all down to God. And the same can be said of us when we find ourselves in those positions where it feels like nothing is happening. It feels like we're not going anywhere. We are still growing. We can still take those moments to draw closer to God, to improve in our skills, so that when we are ready for that moment where we launch forward and see massive progress and massive change in our lives, that we will be ready for it because we used that time of moving forward but going nowhere well. So I encourage you today, if you feel a little bit like that, if you feel like you're trying, like you're striving, like you're moving forward against that current, but you are just not making any progress, please don't despair, because you are growing stronger right now, and you will not be in this place forever. Joseph wasn't in that prison forever. He stepped out one day into the fulfillment of his God-given calling, and so will you. But you just have to be patient in this place. You have to keep moving forward. You have to keep growing, because this is just a season and God may be doing something incredible through it. Thank you so much for joining me here today from Liberia, from the seaside. It's great to be with you. I'm traveling back to Uganda later this week, so I'm not entirely sure when the next video will be, but I will see you when I see you.